Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. This is the 6th part of What If Deku Can't Stop Adopting Kids. Hope you enjoy. Link to the original story and author in the description. Chapter 26, Teacher's Vist. This is a bit much, Aizawa commented. Present Mike, and Nizu were standing right outside the gate of Izuku's home and were currently marveling at how large it was compared to the average house. Not at all, Aizawa. To house this many children with quirks like these, it may not be big enough. Nizu half-joked. The gates opened, and out walked Izuku with Kyoko by his side, or more accurately, hiding behind his leg. Hello. Welcome, Izuku said with no small amount of enthusiasm and nervousness. It's an honor to meet you all. Present Mike. Nizu. Erase her head. 4 heroes in my own home. Wonderful. A fanboy. Aizawa sighed. And we're glad to finally meet you as well, Mr. Midoriya, Nizu said. It's nice to meet the person taking so much responsibility at such a young age. And who's this little lady? Mike said, kneeling down to get on eye level with Kyoko. Hi. Your voice is annoying. Kyoko growled at him from behind Izuku's leg. Mike recoiled from comment. Kyoko. Izuku chastised the girl. Aizawa smirked from under his scarf. I like this kid. This is Kyoko. One of my daughters. Izuku introduced her. She's a bit paranoid of new people. I can sympathize with that. Nizu looked at the purple-haired girl with amusement. You need to protect your family from all the people who want to hurt them. Oof. Kyoko didn't like the way Nizu instantly hit the nail on the head. It felt like he was seeing through her with his beady little eyes. Well, are we gonna go inside or what? Aizawa asked. Yes, of course. Izuku turned around and started walking towards the house. Let me show you around. As they walked towards the entrance of the house, they all noticed Kai's room in the distance. What's that? Present Mike asked. Oh, that's Kai's room, Izuku explained. He's big. I would imagine, considering the size of the room, Nizu said. I imagine everything else is scaled up to his size. Of course, Izuku told him. I think he has everything he needs to be comfortable. He hasn't complained about anything, but he's a very polite boy, so I'm worried I might be missing something and he just hasn't told me. Perhaps we'll take a look at that later, Nizu said. For now, let's go inside, shall we? 7 minutes later. After giving them a tour around some parts of the house, until they finally reached the training room. And this is the trio. There you are, Kiba. And Fu too. Izuku said after seeing the vampire girl lifting very heavy weights that were twice the size of her body. Fu seemed to be spotting her, and there were some blood and broken arms on the ground, implying that his quirk had been used. Hey, Dad. Fu noticed the 3 heroes next to him. Are those the heroes you said were visiting? Heroes. Kiba, in her excitement, threw her weights into where they hit the ceiling, came back down, and landed on Fu, crushing him and turning him into a pile of messed up flesh and bone. Present Mike panicked, with the other 2 heroes doing the same, albeit in a more collected fashion, with Aizawa's eyes becoming extremely wide and Nizu just freezing completely. Kiba. Izuku scolded the girl with a very upset-sounding voice. What have I told you about controlling your strength? Not to show off or let my emotions overwhelm me, Kiba answered sheepishly. If that had been anyone but your brother, they could have been injured or worse. Izuku continued his scolding. Tomorrow's restraint training will be twice as long. No. Kiba groaned. And you'll be cleaning up all the blood and pieces of flesh, Izuku said, much to the girl's despair. Now get those weights off your brother so he can regenerate properly and introduce yourself to the heroes. Kiba nodded gloomily, before taking the weights off of Fu's regenerating body. So I see he has a regeneration quirk, Nizu said, quickly getting over his shock. And perhaps a pain nullification ability as well? Yes, his quirk practically makes him immortal, so long as he regularly eats meat, Izuku explained. Although because of this the kids tend to get pretty careless with their powers when it comes to him. So I guess we won't be seeing any carpet, Aizawa stated. Why yeah. Izuku laughed nervously. After Fu regenerated, he and Kiba ran to Izuku's side to greet the heroes. Greetings Kiba noticed Aizawa. That's a hero? Kiba. Izuku scolded. Ah ha ha. Yes, despite appearances Eraserhead is in fact a pro hero. Nizu said, laughing at Kiba's reaction. He may look like a hobo, but he's more than capable of beating up the bad guy. Present Mike said, also laughing. Ahem. These are Kiba and Fu. You already know what Fu's quirk is. And you've already seen Kiba's. Super strength. Extremely dangerous super strength. Aizawa said. Strength, speed, toughness, I have it all. Kiba boasted. An exemplar of power and grace. Yeah, it was really graceful how you accidentally crushed me. Fu rolled his eyes. An exemplar of power and grace, most of the time, Kiba added. Kids, these are the heroes Eraserhead and Present Mike. They're also teachers at UA. Izuku explained. And the one in the middle is the principal of U.A, the pro hero Nizu. Oh. Well, then I look forward to entering your school, and then quickly surpassing you. Kiba stated cockily. Aizawa was about to say something, but Nizu raised his paw to silence him. No need to crush a child's spirit yet. Wait until she's under our care for that. We look forward to having you, Ms. Kiba, Nizu told her politely, but with an unnerving smile on his face. Nizu expected to find some interesting future students here. Are you planning to become a hero as well, Mr. Fu? Nizu asked the young boy. Yeah, I'm not too strong, but if any villain tries to kill me then they're gonna be there for a while, Fu said half sarcastically. Beating your enemy out through endurance is a decent strategy if that's what your quirk is geared towards, Aizawa told him. And if you can manage it without putting your life at risk. Fu nodded, before looking at Aizawa. I know the other two's quirks, but what's yours? That's Aizawa was about to tell him that he didn't want it well known when Present Mike interrupted. Old Eraserhead here can erase people's quirks. All he has to do is activate his quirk and keep his eyes open, and you can't use your quirk. Aizawa glared at Mike, who completely ignored him. Interesting. Fu pulled out a notebook and started writing things down. Oh, and what's this? Nizu asked Fu. This? Fu stopped writing and held up his notebook. It's my notes. I like to write about interesting things. Mostly quirks. Fascinating, may I look? Nizu asked, receiving a nod from the zombie boy. Nizu took the notebook and started flipping through it, speed reading through the various blurbs and paragraphs. These are rather good for someone his age. He's clearly smarter and more perceptive than normal children. Seemingly to contrast the girl's lack of intelligence. If this talent was nurtured, I could see his analytic abilities coming in very handy. Nizu deduced. These are very good notes. Keep this up and it could be very useful for your future career. Nizu told him while handing him back the notebook. Thanks. Dad did this before I did, but I thought it was neat, so I started doing it too. Fu explained. Oh? You had notebooks similar to these? Nizu asked Izuku. Why yeah. I mostly stopped writing in them after, well I just didn't see a use for them anymore. Izuku stuttered. Yeah, but Caretaker's notes were much better than his, Kiba said. No offense, brother. Oh no, the older more experienced person's notes were better than mine. I'm shocked and embarrassed. Fu said sarcastically, causing Present Mike to laugh. Well, we should continue our tour. We shouldn't bother Ms. Kiba any further, not when she has so much work to do, Nizu said, looking at the bloody mess behind them. Ugh hi. Kiba groaned. The Queen of Eternal Darkness should not have to do such menial labor. The Queen of Eternal Darkness should take responsibility for her mistakes, and try to improve on them, Izuku told her. He's surprisingly mature, especially considering his age and background. Aizawa thought. Still, I can see him being too soft on these kids. Overall not the worst thing, especially considering most of these kids passed, but it could be an issue in the future. With that in mind, Izuku, Kyoku, and the UA staff moved on, leaving Kiba and Fu with the mess. Kiba turned to her brother. So shall we begin cleaning up this mess? We? Fu raised an eyebrow. Izuku only said you had to clean it up. Kiba gasped. Brother! You would not leave me to toil away at such an arduous task all by my lonesome, would you? You make the mess. You clean it up. Maybe next time you'll be more careful and won't splatter my organs all over the floor. Fu said. I'm going to eat and then have Shiruku fix my clothes, again. Kiba pouted heavily as Fu left, before going to get the cleaning supplies. A few minutes later. And this is one of the floors where the children stay, Izuku explained as he moved towards the children's rooms. I assume many of these rooms are altered depending on the child they hold? Nizu asked. Most of them are, Izuku said. Some of the children don't need it. As they walked they saw Kei sitting outside of Fukunoko's room. Seemingly playing battleship with the shy girl through the door. You sunk my battleship. They heard Fukunoko yell from behind the door. Evacuate the ship. Get to the lifeboats. Run. Swim. Izuku smiled as a feeling of happiness gripped onto his heart and tightened his chest. I'm so happy Kei and Eri managed to befriend her. It's one less thing I have to worry about. I told you I was good at this game. My skills really rock the boat. Kei giggled at her own pun. Aizawa groaned. Catching the girl's attention. EAP. Who was that? Fukunoko panicked. Oh. Dad. Fuku, it's just Dad, Kyoko and the UA heroes he said were coming. Kei told her. Are they gonna arrest me for having a bad quirk? Fuku continued to panic. Izuku sighed. Fuku, you don't have a bad quirk. There is no such thing as a bad quirk, a villainous quirk, or an evil quirk, and the heroes aren't here to hurt you. That's right, kid. What he said. Present Mike shouted, scaring Fuku even more. SHSSSH. Literally, everyone but Kei and Fuku shushed the loud hero. Sorry. Mike apologized. Izuku tried to regain his composure. These two are Kei and Fukunoko. Kei is one with the snakes for hair and Fukunoko is the one on the other side of the door. Hello. Nizu greeted them cheerily. I am Nizu. Principal of UA and these two behind me are Eraserhead and Present Mike, it is a pleasure to meet you both. Nice to meet you too, Mr. Mouse. Kei greeted, before giving him a confused look. Or are you a bear? Or both? Are you a mouse bear? Nizu cackled. Who knows? A mouse bear. Is he going to eat me? Fuku asked. Izuku sighed in exasperation. Please don't take it personally, she's always like this. She's had a troublesome history, and that's caused her to gain a persecution complex. It's a big issue. I'm sorry. Fuku wailed. It's not your fault, Izuku said, trying to sound genuine, but you can tell he'd been saying that a lot. It was then that the three UA representatives noticed something about Izuku. He looked tired. If they looked hard enough, they could see that Izuku had been hiding the bags under his eyes with some sort of makeup. Now that they got a better look at his body language, it was clearly that of someone trying to hide exhaustion. In case you were wondering, Kei's quirk turns people to stone whenever they see her eyes, Izuku explained. And Fukunoko's quirk allows her to emit a gas that causes hallucinations of the victim's greatest fears. Those two quirks are extremely dangerous. I can only imagine what kind of mental scarring the shy one could cause. It's a good thing they're away from the general populace, Aizawa thought. But the shy one definitely needs quirk counseling. Midoriya is technically a quirk counselor, but considering his age and how stupidly easy it is to get that license, I doubt he's very good. My, what interesting quirks. Would these two also be interested in enrolling at UAS Hero Course one day? Nizu asked. And no. I mean, no thank you. Fuku shouted. I could never be a hero. Villains are so scary and mean. And if I was a hero, I'd have to use my quirk on people. And that's bad. That's true. Depending on how bad the hallucinations are, using them on villains might be considered too cruel, Aizawa thought. There were a few cases in history in which a person's quirk caused extreme suffering to a person. So much to the point where using it on even villains was considered excessive, and the people with those quirks were unfortunately barred from being heroes. I want to be a zoologist. Kay smiled brightly, and all of them. And study snakes. Well, I'm sure you'll be wonderful at it, Nizu told her. And what is it that you would like to be, Ms. Fukunoko? I don't know. Fuku answered honestly. You don't have to worry about that right now. Present Mike quickly assured her. You've got a long life ahead of you. So take your time. Okay. Fuku answered, more scared than reassured. Seeing that Present Mike's loud voice would do nothing but scare Fuku, Izuku decided they needed to move along. We shouldn't keep you from your game any longer, so we'll be on our way, Izuku told the two children as he urged the group to follow him. Okay. Bye, Dad. Bye, heroes. Bye, Kyoku. Kei said, waving them all goodbye. Bye. Fuku let out a sigh of relief. Happy they were leaving. And with that, they moved past them and through the halls. After a few minutes of silence, Nizu spoke. I noticed that you may have forgotten to tell us this young lady's quirk, Nizu said, referring to Kyoku. The young girl in response focused her glare on the animal principal. Oh. Yes. Sorry. I must have been distracted. Izuku apologized. Kyoku can see and alter a person's memories by touching their head. Ah. I see. Nizu started putting the pieces together. And did she look at any of the other children's memories? Perhaps some of the more unpleasant ones. A few of them. Izuku frowned. And her own life wasn't pleasant before she met us. Kyoku's glare dropped, changing into a sorrowful expression while clutching Izuku's leg a bit tighter. And that would explain her extreme distrust, Aizawa concluded. Izuku sighed and nodded while petting Kyoku's hair to comfort her. Kyoku is a good girl, she just has a hard time trusting people because of what she's seen and experienced. Would you mind if I had a moment alone with her? Nizu asked, much to Izuku's shock. That depends on Kyoku. Izuku turned to his daughter. Daughter. Do you want to talk alone with Mr. Nizu? Kyoku was silent for a minute, before looking at Nizu. She didn't trust the rodent/bear person. Not at all. And she definitely didn't want to be alone with him. But, her father did want her to trust people more, and maybe if Izuku wasn't there, she could get Nizu to let her look at his memories. You won't go far? Kyoku asked her adopted father. I won't, Izuku promised her. We'll just be going to my office and I'll be looking at the cameras the whole time. Kyoku paused before nodding and letting go of Izuku's leg for the first time since the visit started. Izuku seemed hesitant to leave her, but after shooting both Kyoku and Nizu concerned looks, Mike and Aizawa left towards the office. Once the others were out of earshot, Kyoku spoke. What do you want? Kyoku asked rudely, keeping a good distance away from him. I just wanted to tell you a bit about myself, Nizu said calmly. Some time ago I was a regular animal. But at some point in my life, I gained my quirk. My body changed, and I became quite a bit smarter. But I was still an animal. Just a slightly different one. And then, humans found me. Kyoko had a distinct feeling that the story was going to get a lot sadder from this point on. They took me to a laboratory and did very bad things to me. They kept me in small cages, and didn't feed me very much. Nizu explained, his smile never dropping. And after many painful experiments, I eventually changed into what I am now, and escaped. After that, much like you, I didn't trust humans and hated them for a very long time. Nizu saw it in her eyes, the words "they're like me" flashed in her mind. How did he know this? Well, unfortunately, there were many people like the ones who hurt him, and they did not limit themselves to just animals. And what better test subjects than children who can't fight back? One of the reasons Nizu loved this job was because he got to see the faces of those criminals as he put them away for good. And even more to his delight, many prisoners shared his disgust towards child experimentation, but not his restraint. But back to Kyoko, it was clear the girl was still not fully trusting him. Why did you stop? Well, as time went on, I saw many things. I saw that humans were capable of more than just cruelty, and at some points, I found I was the one being cruel. Nizu explained. And eventually, someone extended their hand to me. Much like Izuku did to you. And that put me on the path to where I am today. Kyoko seemed to be thinking over his words. Wondering if she should believe him or not. Can I see your memories? Nizu had already predicted that response. After all, if you didn't trust someone and could look at their memories, obviously you'd want to do that. Of course, he didn't want her touching him or looking into his memories, but if he didn't, then she'd think he was suspicious and lose whatever trust he might have built with her. Truly a difficult situation to be in. For anyone but Nizu. Tell me, have you looked at Eri's memories? Nizu asked. Kyoko flinched, before giving an uneasy nod. Well, judging from the reports I've read about her past, we have somewhat similar backgrounds. Nizu saw the girl flinch again. You're free to look into my memories, but I must ask you, do you want to see what you saw with Eri, again? Kyoko gave him a very uneasy look, before looking at her hands, considering if she really wanted to see those horrors again. And like Nizu knew she would, she chose not to. You don't need to trust me quite yet. It took me quite some time before I started to trust people. But I want to ask you to open your mind. Nizu told her. Don't think of any group of people as one thing. Whether that be good or bad. Each and every person is different. Unique. Just when you think one person is one thing, they might be something completely different. Take your father for example. Daddy? Kyoko replied. Most of the world wrote him off as weak. Simply because he was quirkless. Nizu said. But he's not. Kyoko protested immediately. Exactly. Nizu agreed. Many people who've been through what Izuku has been through, don't function as well as he does. And most people his age can't even take care of a single child, let alone 11. Izuku was strong, in ways most people don't understand. But people judged him because they couldn't keep an open mind. Do you understand what I'm trying to tell you? Kyoko nodded hesitantly. Very good. Nizu gave her his least creepy smile. Now then, shall we join your father and the others? Kyoko quickly nodded and ran toward Izuku's office. Nizu slowly followed behind her. It's a good thing she never asked what happened to those scientists. Chapter 27, Preparing for the Worst. Izuku and the teachers walked into his workspace, as Izuku started explaining things. So this is my office, Izuku said. Sorry, it's kind of a mess, but I had a lot of paperwork. Kai's room wasn't easy to make after all. On Izuku's desk and his filing cabinets were papers. Tons and tons and papers. They were about as neat as they could be, but given the number of papers, that wasn't saying much. Oh God, and I thought I hated paperwork. At least I didn't have to do it when I was 15. Present Mike cringed. Aizawa meanwhile looked over some of the finished paperwork. Looks fine. At the very least he's capable of doing the basics. Still, putting aside his age and mental health, this is too much work for one person. While they were doing that, Izuku was looking outside his office window. Transfixed on something. Daddy! Kyoku rushed in and ran towards Izuku, grabbing his leg. Kyoku! Izuku looked away from what he was staring at for a moment to pay attention to her. Where's Nizu? Right here, here. Nizu walked into the office, before calmly closing the door behind him. Izuku looked at Kyoku and noticed that she seemed to be a little distressed. Kyoku, is everything okay? I'm fine. Kyoku raised her arms, signaling she wanted Izuku to hold her. Izuku promptly picked up the girl and held her in his arms. However, he quickly felt his fatigue catch up to him as Kyoku felt much heavier than she actually was, and he realized he couldn't hold her forever, so he put her on his shoulders. After that, he looked back outside. My now what is so interesting outside? Nizu asked, before walking up and looking out the window himself. Oh. What? Aizawa asked, before him and Present Mike looked out the window themselves. Oh. Outside was a rather strange sight. Kai was laying down in the emptied-out pool. How it got emptied out no one knows, with several other children showering him with water and soup. Kota was using his quirk to douse him with water, while Sansen and Shiroku crawled around on his body scrubbing him, while Yami had some Griff and Grim to help wash and dump water onto Kai, but now he was lounging on the side in a lawn chair. I have many questions. Present Mike said with no small amount of disbelief. I believe that it'd be best to go outside now, Nizu said. Yeah, Izuku said. Outside a few minutes later. As Shiroku was washing her brother, she noticed Izuku, Kyoku, and the UA staff walking up to them. Guys! Daddy and the UA people are here. Shiroku called to her siblings and Kota. Kota stopped spraying water and turned around. Sansen stopped what she was doing and got off her brother, putting down her brushes and spitting out all the soapy water onto the side. After getting all the liquid that wasn't naturally a part of her body off of her, Sansen moved a tendril over to Yami and started rapidly tapping him to wake him up. Rah! 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 Yami had a tendency to bite whoever woke him up due to his instincts, so kids like Sansen and Fu were typically given the duty when the need arose. Pa! Yami spat out Sansen's goo, waking up fully from his short nap. Dad and the teachers are here, Shiroku told her brother as she crawled off of Kai. It's okay Kai, you can stand. Now that everyone was off of him, Kai used his head to pull himself up. When Izuku, Kyoku, and the UA staff arrived at the pool, the children were already lined up and waiting. Already lined up by the time we got here. If only my class were this well behaved. Aizawa said. I believe I know the white one, his name is Yami, correct, Nizu said, remembering the young boy from the incident that happened not too long ago. And these creatures are of his creation. Yami said as confirmation. Didn't the reports say he was feral? Present Mike asked. He was, but then I had Kyoku use her quirk to teach him about everything, Izuku explained. There are still a few issues, but he's adjusted very well for the most part. Very good. And clever application of her quirk. Good work on both your parts. Nizu praised, before looking at Sansen who had moved over to him, and started inspecting the teachers. And who is this? That is Sansen. Izuku introduced her. Her body is made up of acid normally, but thanks to a chemical insertion given to her every 24 hours we've been able to neutralize the acidic properties. How interesting, Nizu said, reaching out and touching Sansen, inspecting the goo. Hero. Sansen said. Sansen also wants to be a hero, Izuku said. She trains practically every day. I think she'll be a very promising student when the time comes. Her quirk reminds me of the sludge villain. But even more dangerous if you consider the acid. Aizawa thought. She's gonna be a problem child, I'm sure of it. I also would like to become a hero. Kai bellowed. It is nice to meet you all. I am Kai Midoriya. I look forward to being your student one day. And we look forward to having you, Nizu told him. He really is big. President Mike whistled. And he's probably going to get bigger as he grows. Aizawa sighed. Both teachers silently hoped that they would be retired by the time Kai came to UA. Meanwhile, Shiruku was looking at Aizawa like he was a rotten egg. Circling around the tired hero and inspecting him. Do you want to say something? Aizawa asked her, not having that patience for her shenanigans. You're a hero? Shiruku asked him skeptically. President Mike giggled and Aizawa sighed. Yes. Despite what my appearance may suggest, I am in fact a pro-hero. Shiruku grimaced. Are you perhaps the Justice Hobo? President Mike couldn't hold back his laughter and started cackling hysterically. The Justice Hobo. Ha ha ha. Aizawa's eyes twitched. Shiruku! Izuku shouted, slightly horrified by the insult. I'm sorry, father, but look at him. Shiruku pointed to Eraserhead. It's just so bare. He might as well be wearing a black onesie with a belt, scarf, and goggles. I am so sorry about her. Izuku apologized. She's very into clothing and designs and takes them a bit too seriously. I do not. Shiruku pouted. What about that time you wrestled your sister through several walls and destroyed multiple rooms just because she wouldn't try on your clothes? Izuku reminded her. Shiruku grimaced at the memory, not giving a response to that comment. What people choose to wear is their choice. Now please apologize to Eraserhead. Izuku told her. Shiruku looked at Eraserhead, cringing for a moment before looking away and apologizing. I'm sorry, sir. Eraserhead grunted. Not the first time this has happened. Annoyingly, it won't be the last. Wanting to divert attention away from this, Izuku looked over to Kota. This is Kota Izumi. I haven't adopted him, he's just a friend of everyone here. I see. Good to see the children are not completely isolated from the outside world. I was concerned the only person outside this family and a partiosi to come here was Ms. Uraraka. Nizu said. Are we going to ask what is going on out here, or are we just gonna ignore it? Mike asked. Because I don't know about the rest of you, but I'm confused? Simple, Kai didn't smell too good so we decided to give him a bath, Shiruku explained. Wash. Sanson said. Izuku's pupils shrunk as he came to a horrifying realization. Oh my god, I forgot to give him a bathroom. Looks like that fatigue is making him sloppy. Nizu thought. Oh my god. I need to go back and fix this immediately. Izuku started running towards the house while pulling out his phone to make some calls. I will go assist him, Nizu said. I have a feeling he'll need all the help he can get. The two teachers nodded, and Nizu calmly walked towards the house. Once the pair made it back to the house, President Mike suddenly had a thought. Hey, if you didn't have a bathroom, where have you been going, President Mike asked. The answer the two received would cause them to regret even thinking of asking that question. Meanwhile, in the greenhouse. Eri was glad that it didn't seem like the teachers would be coming here. She had prepared herself to meet new people today, but it's not like she really wanted to. Meeting people she didn't know was scary, especially adults. And she didn't like the idea of being uncomfortable in the greenhouse. It was one of her favorite places to go. It was calm, quiet, and nice and warm. And as more plants were added, the nicer it was to look at too. And it would only get better when the apple tree grew in. She liked it here. When it was just her and Otoko. Oh, Otoko was here too. The large boy was almost always here, attending to the plants. When he first came here he was a bit scary, but Eri had quickly gotten over his appearance. After all, she had other strange and scary-looking siblings. And she had quickly found she quite liked the boy. He was quiet, unlike many of her siblings, and he didn't move around so quickly or overwhelm her by constantly moving from thing to thing. He had also started planting many new plants, some had looked quite pretty. She hadn't voiced this appreciation, she still wasn't very good at approaching people, and she knew he appreciated his space, which she definitely understood. Besides, she had a feeling that somehow, he understood. About an hour later, at the gates. Izuku, Kyoku, and the UA staff stood outside the gates as the staff were about to leave. "Thank you for helping me with the bathroom situation." Izuku bowed as thanks to Nizu. "It was my pleasure. I've had experience dealing with large children, so I was more than happy to lend my expertise," Nizu said. "What's more, it appears you needed some assistance, you do have a lot on your plate after all." I can handle it," Izuku said quickly. "I'm sure you can," Aizawa said dryly. "But don't forget we're all, okay, most of us here are human. And we all require rest. If you don't start hiring help, you're going to start seeing major health problems." Kyoko looked concerningly at her father. I'll be fine," Izuku said. "I've been looking around for help for a while, I haven't found anyone, but I will." Mike gave Izuku a concerned look, as he knew the kid wasn't being fully truthful. Not that he could really do anything about it. Calling him out would likely do nothing but cause more stress, which would not be healthy for him both mentally and physically. "Take care of yourself, kid. For their sakes at least." "I will," Izuku said a bit too quickly. Well, we shouldn't keep you any longer, farewell Midoriya." Nizu as he and the teachers turned to leave. After they were out of earshot, Nizu spoke. "We'll be having a meeting about this tomorrow morning." "I figured as much," Aizawa said. Meanwhile, Izuku was praising Kyoku. "You were very good today," he told her while patting her head. "Thank you for behaving." Kyoko grinned at receiving praise. "Can I have chocolate, Daddy?" "Sure. But just one," Izuku told her as they walked back towards the house. The next morning, UA meeting room. "So I'm guessing this about the Midoriya visit?" All Might asked. "Indeed," Nizu said. "Good news, the situation is much better than we thought." "Oh good, but given what we thought I'm sure there are still plenty of things to worry about," Snipe said. "Is at least more competent than the OPCCC, or rather, DOC?" 13 asked. "Quite," Nizu said. "Mr. Midoriya is very mature for his age and is smarter than most people his age as well. He's handling this the best he can and is doing everything in his power to help these children." All Might smiled. He already knew these things, but it was nice to hear Nizu put everyone else at ease about Izuku's intentions. However, Nizu added, putting aside his age, he was still mentally and physically abused, outcast by society, and it shows. "Did he show any resentment or distrust you while you were there?" Cementos asked. "Not at all, Midoriya is clearly a hero fan and was quite excited to have us there," Nizu refuted. "One of his daughters thought she was not happy," Mike added. "She was giving us the stink eye the whole time." "Back to Midoriya, while he didn't seem to distrust us, it's possible that's only because we're heroes," Aizawa said. "He seems to have some level of distrust for others, and this is keeping him from hiring anyone to help him. While a fair level of skepticism is good considering the situation, for the number of children under his care he is going to need help," Midnight said. "It was clear he was already exhausting himself," Aizawa said. "However, he seems to have little to no care for his own health, prioritizing anything and everything involving the children first." Izuku Midoriya was called useless, and discriminated against for his entire life. Snipe reminded them. As such, his self-worth and confidence are almost non-existent, as is his sense of self-preservation. Add to that his nature of wanting to help people and all the children he needs to help at once, he simply has little to no time to think of himself. Nor does he desire to. And then there is of course the matter of his dream. Or rather his former dream. Nizu sipped his tea. Izuku Midoriya wanted to be a hero. However, since he could not achieve that dream, he's attempting to fill that void, that feeling of aimlessness and uselessness. But a lifelong dream is not easily replaced. One of the reasons Midoriya does seek help or try to decrease his workload is simply because, without the work, Midoriya feels incomplete. Anytime his thoughts are not on his work, he is berating himself for giving up on his dream. He works to feel useful, and if he asks for help or stops working at any given point, then that feeling of usefulness also stops. The point of the matter is, even if Midoriya's health falls to shambles, he will not stop working, nor can anyone make him. So how do we help him then? All Might asked. It's not like we can force him to take part in therapy, and we can't hire people for him. We ourselves don't have to do much, Nizu said. But our first step is to wait for him to collapse. What? There was a general feeling of shock among the teachers, at the suggestion of letting Izuku run himself into the ground. Think about it logically. We can't stop Midoriya from working, nor can we convince him to slow down. Inevitably Midoriya will overwork himself too hard and fall ill, leading to a physical and mental collapse. There is simply nothing we can do about this. Nizu explained. What we can do is be there afterward to provide support for him and the children. But how exactly are we gonna do that? Snipe asked. We can't personally be there all the time, not with hero duties in our classes, and having non-heroes come in whom Midoriya would distrust, would only add to his stress, not to mention the effect it would have on the children. And that is where Ms. Uraraka and the students come in, Nizu said. Ms. Uraraka will be key in helping Midoriya, both with the children and with his mental and physical recovery. And what exactly do you mean by that? Aizawa had a feeling he wouldn't like this. Once Midoriya collapses, we will send Class 1A, Sans Bakugo, to the Midoriya household to look after the children and Midoriya. As you said, sending strangers there would simply stress everyone there, but people with Ms. Uraraka's recommendation would likely be a different matter. Ms. Uraraka will assist Midoriya during his time of need and take advantage of his weakened mental state to convince him to seek help both for his job and for his mind. This will hopefully put Midoriya on the path to fixing his damaged psyche, so that way he can truly help these children without putting himself at risk. I don't like having to use children to fix this, and it feels like we're abusing young Uraraka's friendship with him. All Might said. Couldn't we simply approach his mother for help? Or maybe I could do something? Midoriya is a huge fan of mine. Unfortunately, Midoriya's mother is not the best person for this. She shares several of the same mental issues that he does, albeit not as bad. While she will certainly be involved, we can't rely on her to fix this situation. Nizu explained. And to put it simply, All Might, let us not forget who caused him to give up on that dream, and sent him into a spiral of depression. All Might grimaced and looked away in shame. We can't forget that even after his collapse, Midoriya is still in charge, and he needs to let us in, Nizu explained. We can't risk Midoriya refusing our aid and attempting to keep working in his weakened state. We need someone he trusts completely. Someone who hasn't hurt him. And that leaves only Ms. Uraraka. His only true friend. So in the end, the only way to fix a problem caused by putting a child in charge of other children is more children, Aizawa said. I'd be poetic if it wasn't so idiotic. Well, to be fair, if Midoriya hadn't met Eri and gotten this job, he most likely would have ended his own life, Nizu said simply, causing several teachers to cringe and All Might to turn pale. While this is going to be a difficult road ahead of us, I feel this could very well turn out to be a blessing for both Midoriya and the children. Nizu took another sip of his tea. The fate of many children lies in our hands and the hands of our students. Let us handle this with care. Chapter 28, Hard Choices. Damages. There was a hole in his office floor. It was not just in his office floor, however, the hole led all the way down from his office to the bottom of his house in the kitchen. How did that happen? Well, the answer was the usual one in regards to things being broken. Kiba. The girl had been testing her abilities, on camera of course, and one of those tests was inspired by a test that Achiko had told her about in her first day at UA. Ball throwing. Not to her credit, she didn't throw it at the house itself. She actually threw it straight up into the air. The problem was simple, however: what comes up must come down. And due to changes in the wind, slight movements with momentum and all that, the ball came crashing down, not into the backyard, but through the entire house. Izuku sighed and rubbed his temples. That girl, he loved her to death, but she caused him so much trouble. Kiba had of course been reprimanded, but not much of a punishment was given, seeing as she didn't really predict the ball moving so far from where she had thrown it, and the damages were ultimately small and had not affected anyone with the exception of scaring the crap out of Yami when it happened. The holes were small, but still, it was just more paperwork for him to do. That Kiba girl sure doesn't quit, huh? Mr. Uraraka asked, having come to inspect the damage. No, she doesn't. Izuku felt more and more tired as he looked at the hole. That girl may single-handedly be keeping us in a job. Mr. Uraraka jokes. No, it's definitely not just her, Izuku said, remembering the time Fu and Shiroku accidentally broke the staircase by smashing Fu into it. You okay, boy? That paperwork getting to ya? Or is all this finally starting to affect your wallet? Mr. Uraraka asked nervously. Izuku was their main source of income. Heck, since they moved here, he was their only source of income, and his pockets dried up, so did theirs. No, money isn't an issue. This affects money-wise about as much as buying a candy bar. Izuku said, before realizing how it could be interpreted by his present company. And not that I'm bragging or anything. Mr. Uraraka laughed. Don't worry about it, boy, the richer you are the more money we get. You bragging about it just reassures me I'm not gonna be out of a job. And that I can keep supporting my daughter. Why, yeah. Izuku stuttered. Despite doing what basically everyone would consider a kind deed in hiring Achiko's parents, Izuku still hadn't told Achiko that he did it, nor did he tell the Urarakas why he hired them out of all people, despite the fact they lived so far away and weren't exactly a famous high-price construction company like most wealthy people would hire. The main reason why is because while Izuku knew it was an overall helpful thing for him to do, he wasn't sure how they would perceive it. On Achiko's front, Izuku was concerned she'd think it was a handout or an act of pity, and she'd get so offended she wouldn't want to be friends with him anymore. And on the Uraraka's part, he was concerned they'd see this as him hitting on their daughter. So he wanted to find the perfect way to explain this to both of them. Dad! Shouted a familiar voice from behind the two of them. Why is my life like this? Izuku wondered. Cheiko! Mr. Uraraka said, surprised at his daughter's sudden appearance. What are you doing here? What am I doing here? What are you doing here? Achiko asked. This isn't a few hours road trip from home, you know. Well, me and your mother were gonna surprise you with this, but we moved here for work. Mr. Uraraka explained. Mr. Midoriya here offered us a contract to stay here and do repairs on his house from time to time. Huh? Achiko screeched in confusion. This had completely come out of nowhere for her. Or had it? Achiko looked at Izuku with a pout. This was exactly the kind of thing Izuku would do. Spend exorbitant amounts of money and inconvenience himself for the sake of someone else. If she didn't mention she didn't like handouts, he would have thrown money at her so hard it'd make her spin. That didn't make it any less sweet though. Izuku, you goof. Why didn't you tell me about this? This is great. Achiko made sure to express the fact that this was a good thing, and that she liked it. Knowing Izuku, he'd somehow thought she could think this was a bad thing. While Izuku was breathing a sigh of relief, Mr. Uraraka looked between the two of them. Wait a minute, you two know each other? Izuku quickly started getting nervous yet as he realized he was not yet out of the doghouse. Yeah, Dad, sorry I didn't have the chance to tell you about him. Izuku is my best friend. Achiko explained. Izuku? Mr. Uraraka was a little surprised by the use of Izuku's first name by his daughter, but more things slowly started to make sense to him as he put the pieces together. Oh. I see what's going on here. Why you do? Izuku asked, with the slight hope he had that things would go well showing in his voice. Yeah, this is an elaborate attempt to flirt with my daughter, Mr. Uraraka said. Izuku then promptly turned from green to red, as he blushed so hard he nearly passed out from blood rushing to his face. Iawafaka dash. Dad! Achiko shouted at her father, her face turning red as well. Get over here! Achiko opened the door leading to the small hallway outside his office and rushed her father through it, before closing the door so Izuku couldn't hear it. Okay, I know you don't know him too well, but this is definitely not flirting, Achiko said in a yell/whisper. We're just really good friends. Come on, sweetheart, no one would go through all this trouble just for a friend, Mr. Uraraka said. At least he knows my baby girl is worth the money, I'll give him that. Dad! Izuku is just that nice, Achiko insisted. He literally adopts kids no one else wants, because they can kill them. Just because he wants to give them a nice childhood. Mr. Uraraka paused, fair point. Izuku only has one real friend, me. So of course he's willing to do something like this, Achiko said. He'd probably do a lot of crazy things if I asked him to. Something I'm trying not to take advantage of. Mr. Uraraka didn't seem convinced. I don't know, honey. Dad, trust me when I say, the day Izuku flirts with someone is the day pigs fly. That boy is shyer than half the kids here, and most of them have been abused in some way, Achiko said. He's just a really nice guy, who's really glad to finally have a friend. Also, he's rich, this probably wasn't too much of an issue for him money-wise. He has a lot of things on his plate, so please don't stress him out with things like this. There was a pause after Achiko's speech, as Mr. Uraraka thought it over. I guess I'll drop it. For now. He is my employer after all. But still, if he wants to get with my little girl, he's gonna have to go through me first. Achiko shook her head, blush still covering her face. It's not like that. Just go back inside and say thank you. Then, we can go home and get Mom and we can celebrate being together again. Mr. Uraraka smiled at his daughter. Sure, honey, me and your mother would love to. Both of them smiled, before re-entering Izuku's office, and seeing that the boy was currently a moment away from having a nervous breakdown. Hey there, sorry about that. No problems here. We'll have those holes fixed up in no time, Mr. Uraraka said. Oh. Really, that's good, Izuku said nervously. Yes, well I think I'll go talk to the others. You two kids behave, Mr. Uraraka jokes. Dad. Achiko and Izuku both blushed heavily as Mr. Uraraka left. He smiled as he walked. At the end of the day, it didn't matter if they were friends or something more for now. Izuku clearly valued his daughter, and that was what mattered. So for now, he'd stay back and watch. Just for now. The hard choices. Izuku tried not to let his nervousness show. Yesterday Nami had called him and told him that some government bigwigs from the upper echelons of DOC wanted to meet with him. He had no idea what it could be about, but he had a distinct feeling that whatever it was about, he wasn't going to like it. Thank you for choosing to meet with us, Mr. Midoriya, said one of the three men in suits that had come into his office. I was told this was a matter important to the children, Izuku said, a nervous sweat drop dripping down his forehead. Yes, about that, we represent the second level of DOC, the level you and most people don't interact with, the man said. As you know, DOC's duty is to protect society from overly powerful children or OPCs, as well as protecting the children themselves. Izuku nodded. However, you've only been dealing with the first level, the man continued. This level has a few tasks. 1. Finding OPCs. 2. Helping out guardians of OPCs to make sure the child can live safely in society. And 2. Taking in OPCs whose parents have left them one way or another, and then giving them to you. Yes, Izuku said, wondering where this was going. However, the second level appropriately deals with the second level of OPCs. These OPCs simply cannot exist within normal society, due to the nature of their quirk being so dangerous that we cannot assure they wouldn't kill dozens of people accidentally every year. The man said. As such, our job is simply to find these OPCs and contain them within our facilities, indefinitely. Izuku's eyes widened. Wait, by indefinitely do you mean dash? Forever, or until we manage to find a way to reduce their danger level to a level 1 OPC. However, that rarely happens. Most of the time the child is simply confined in a facility, for the rest of their lives. The man explained. Izuku felt a rush of oncoming emotions: shock, anger, sadness, despair. These children are of course allowed to see their families in the safest way we can allow, but the nature of their quirks mean they'd be lucky to ever go outside again. The man continued. We have been looking for a solution to this issue, but have yet to find one, until recently. Izuku thought about what that could mean, and what that had to do with him. And then, he figured it out. You want Eri's blood. Izuku realized. So you can use Overhaul's quirk erasing formula. We've been studying it since his arrest and subsequent death, but now I believe we can properly replicate it if we had more of that girl's blood. The man said. If we could replicate this serum, then we could inject this serum into those people, and allow them to finally live their lives freely. You'd also be making them quirkless, subjecting them years of discrimination and mistreatment, and doing that by harvesting blood from a traumatized little girl, Izuku said. All his nervousness vanished instantly, as he switched into protecting the children mode. We understand you've had a bad experience with being quirkless, however that is simply because you lived in an area with heavy amounts of quirk discrimination. The man said. Not all areas discriminate against quirklessness quite as badly, and that discrimination pales in comparison to spending the rest of your life in what is essentially being locked in a very comfortable prison. Izuku grits his teeth. As much as his mind screamed that being quirkless and a curse and doing it to others would be beyond cruel, the logical part of his brain told him that he was right and keeping them in those facilities would be even worse. But Eri would be donating blood. The man cut him off. Millions of people have and still do donate blood every day. It's completely fine so long as one does not get greedy as Overhaul did. Izuku winced. He didn't like this, he really didn't like this. But the man was making logical arguments. And as much as he disliked the idea of Eri's blood being taken again, he also hated the idea of just leaving those people stuck in the facilities to suffer. But I can't do that to Eri. She just got out of that situation. If I tell her they're gonna take her blood, she might go into a panic attack. Izuku thought hard about this situation. But I can't leave those people. Ugh, hi. Just think about it, you and that girl will be heroes to dozens of people. The man said, making sure to use the H word. Izuku glared at the man, before looking away to think about it some more. In the end, he couldn't make a decision. Because he decided it wasn't his decision to make. I will ask Eri about this, Izuku said. If she agrees, I will draw up a contract. Mr. Midoriya, the girl is only around 7 years old. The man said. You can't dash. It is her decision to make, Izuku said, adding more edge to his voice. I will not force my daughter to do what she is uncomfortable with. If she says she is okay with it, then I will call you. The man opened his mouth to argue, but Izuku cut him off. This is the best you are getting, Izuku said curtly. Now, if you don't mind, I would appreciate it if you would give me some time so I can talk to her, and let her think about the decision. Izuku knew they were trying to pressure him, he would not allow it. Because if he was pressured, then so would Eri. He and the man glared at each other, the agent testing to see if Izuku would lose his nerve. He didn't. After a few moments, the man got up. Well, then we will be eagerly awaiting your answer. Good day. The men left, leaving Izuku with a task he did not look forward to. Later, in Eri's room. Eri was currently on her bed, trying to figure out a mystery that had been plaguing her for over an hour. A Rubik's Cube. Kiba had bought the object, or rather she got Izuku to buy it for her, so she could solve it live on stream. However, Izuku was 100% sure Kiba would break more than a few of them, so he bought about a dozen, and much to his surprise Kiba only broke 5 before taking a break. Eri had gotten her hands on one of the spares and was having difficulty solving it. Knock knock. Eri? Izuku said. His voice was weak and filled with hesitation, something that immediately caused worry to stir inside Eri. Can I come in? Eri nodded, only to realize that Izuku couldn't see her nodding from outside. Why yes. Izuku opened the door and walked in, before carefully closing the door behind him. He looked at Eri, with a pained expression that made Eri even more nervous. Are you okay? Eri asked him fearfully. I'm fine. Izuku sighed. It's just, Eri. You know what DOC does, right? Eri nodded. They take kids with dangerous quirks so other people won't get hurt. Basically, yes. And those kids are either taken to me or their parents take care of them with the help of DOC. Izuku explained. But, there are people with quirks that are too dangerous, and they have to be stuck in special places like Shiruku, Kai, and the others. Except they have to be there forever. Eri's eyes widened. But, they didn't like those places. Yes, that's the problem. If we make them stay there, then they'll be really, really sad. But if they don't stay where, they could hurt a lot of people. Izuku explained as simply as possible. So what do we do? Eri asked. Izuku took a deep breath and pulled all the willpower he had. Well, Eri, they have a solution, but they want to take their quirks away, and they need your blood. Izuku managed to say, even though it felt terrible. Eri's eyes widened in horror, and she instinctively backed away. The act of which broke Izuku's heart more than a little. You don't have to worry, Eri, no one is forcing you. Izuku quickly reassured her. No one will take your blood if you don't want them to. They won't? Eri asked fearfully. Vague incomplete memories of Overhaul flashed in her vision. No. Let me explain this better, Izuku said. If you say yes, then let's say once a month, some people will come to take blood from you. First, they'll put you to sleep so you don't panic or feel any pain or fear. All you'll feel is a little soreness when you wake up. Then they'll take a needle and take a small amount of blood from you, and that's it. Then they'll leave. And that's it. They'll use the blood to make the quirk erasing serum so they can give it to people who have quirks that are too dangerous so they can live normal happy lives again. But if you say no, then no one will come, and you can keep doing whatever you've been doing. But then no one will be helped. The horror set in on the poor girl as she realized the weight of the choice in front of her. Either she did something she was insanely uncomfortable with, or she would have to lead an unknown, but presumably large, amount of people to suffer for the rest of their lives. The pressure was immense. And Izuku could sense it, and guilt weighed down on him heavily, as he watched the poor girl struggle to try and make a decision, getting overwhelmed by the consequences that could come from either choice. You don't need to make that choice now. Izuku said. Just think about. Maybe talk to your siblings about it. Oh, okay, Eri said, thoroughly shaken. Izuku looked at her for a moment, before wrapping her in a hug. It's okay, no matter what decision you make, I'll always love you. And your siblings too. It took Eri a moment before she hugged back, tightly. After a few minutes, the two eventually separated. Do you want me to stay with you? Izuku asked her. To his surprise, Eri shook her head. I want to talk to Kyoku, Eri said. Okay, but I'll be in my office if you need me. I have to work out how this is gonna work if you say yes or no, Izuku told her. But if you need anything at all, just talk to me. Eri nodded, and slowly, Izuku walked out of the room. And immediately started kicking himself. Metaphorically. Stupid. Idiot. Worthless. Izuku berated himself. He felt like he was about to vomit. How could he put Eri through such a difficult and stressful choice? Especially after what she's been through. But at the same time, what else could he do? Was he supposed to force her? That would be terrible. After being forced to give blood to Overhaul and then this. She would never trust him again. And he couldn't just say no and condemn all those people to suffering. He physically could not bring himself to do that. But there had to be something he was missing. Some easy choice that didn't involve hurting his little girl. He was just too stupid to see it. Izuku hit his head against the wall in frustration, trying to release pent-up frustration. Why her? Why out of all the children did it have to be her? Because the truth is, the agent was right, donating blood wasn't a huge deal, people did it all the time. It's just that it was Eri donating blood. I'd be like taking someone who was almost stabbed to death to a knife museum. Izuku sighed, continuing his depressing walk towards his office. Now it was out of his hands. He would have to wait for Eri to make her decision. Hopefully, her siblings could help alleviate the stress of that choice. Hopefully. Chapter 29, One Step Away from the Past. The game room. You need to stop breaking these controllers. Kyoko told her vampiric opponent. It's not my fault these cursed controls cannot handle my might. Kiba shouted in frustration after breaking yet another controller. Don't you have a special controller that's super strong? Kyoko asked her skeptically. Why yes, but it's all the way upstairs, Kiba said, making a quick excuse. Queen of laziness. Kyoko said. Kiba was about to retort, but then Eri came running and hugged Kyoko. Clearly distressed. Eri? Kyoko asked, quickly returning the hug in an attempt to comfort her sister. What's wrong? Eri looked at her with pleading puppy dog eyes that instantly made Kyoko melt from cuteness but also made her concerned. Can we go to your room? How could she ever say no? Kyoko's room. The two of them sat on Kyoko's bed, and after they got comfortable, Eri explained the situation. No. Kyoko hugged Eri protectively. You can't let them. They might try to use your blood as a weapon to hurt people. Eri's eyes widened. Like Overhaul? Kyoko nodded. Like Overhaul. But Izuku said they were going to help people. Eri pointed out. They probably lied to him. Kyoko accused. Daddy is too nice, they must have said he can help people to trick him into letting them have your blood. Kyoko loved her father, she loved him dearly. But she knew he could be too kind, he believed people too much. That's why she had to be vigilant. And protect her family from liars. I'll go talk to Daddy. I have to warn him. Kyoko jumped off the bed and ran out the door, intent on finding Izuku. This left Eri with time to think about what Kyoko told her. She hadn't thought about it, but they might be lying to trick Izuku so they could use her blood as a weapon. Like Overhaul did. In all the cartoons and movies, they showed the government being bad people, so it made sense. But, Izuku told her those things on TV were very different from real life, and Kyoko was often called paranoid by everyone else. Even if the government were completely trustworthy, Kyoko probably still wouldn't trust them. So maybe, even though she really liked Kyoko, she wasn't the right person to ask. But then, who was? Maybe someone who had been with DOC. Fukunoko's room. Fukunoko was sewing up a hole that had been made in her skirt when there was a gentle knock on her door. Despite the gentleness of the knock, Fukunoko still flinched. Who's there? It's Eri, Eri answered. Can I come in? Please? Fuku debated internally. On one hand, she didn't want people in her room. On the other hand, it was Eri. Are you upset with me? Fuku asked. And no. You don't have to let me in. I don't want to bother you. Eri said sadly. Fuku was immediately stabbed with guilt and ran over to the door. No, you can come in. See, I'm opening the door right now. Fuku opened the door and was immediately met with a distressed Eri, causing her to panic even more. Oh no, I made her so upset. She probably won't want to be friends anymore. And oh my god, I wasn't thinking I let her into my room. Stupid Fuku, what did you do? Fuku berated herself. F Fuku? Eri said, getting the attention of her zoned-out friend. Are you okay? Fuku snapped out of her thoughts and looked at Eri, trying to see if she was angry or upset with her, but she wasn't, at least not in any visible way. Normally that wouldn't get her to lower her guard, but she reminded herself that this was Eri. So she convinced herself to lower her guard just a little, tiny bit. Did you want something? Fuku asked. One explanation later. Oh, Eri, I don't know which one to pick. Fuku answered honestly. I wouldn't want anyone near my body like that, but those buildings that the government has, I don't want to go back to them. Eri frowned. Was it bad? They didn't hurt me, but I was lonely, Fuku admitted. No one visited me like you and Kei do. The only people that came were the men in suits, but they were like robots, and I think they hated me. It was better than being with that bad man, but I like here a lot better. A lot better. Eri thought about that. She was glad that those people weren't being hurt, at least not physically, but she knew just as well as many of these kids did. Loneliness can hurt a lot. Flashes of her time with Overhaul popped up in her head. This time they weren't of her time in the chair. It was her time in her room. Just sitting there in deafening silence, completely and utterly miserable. And then she imagined someone else in that position. Someone who had done nothing wrong and whose only crime was being born with a bad quirk. It horrified her. Eri? Fuku gave Eri a concerned look as her friend started to panic. Eri, what's wrong? Eri snapped out of her thoughts and had noticed she was breathing a bit too much. After a few moments to calm herself, she responded. And nothing. It doesn't look like nothing. Fuku pointed out. Eri, I don't want those people to touch you. I am not sure you should say yes. Eri looked down. She wanted a more definite answer. Because she herself was so unsure. Sensing this, Fuku suggested something. Why don't you ask Kei? She might know. Kei. Eri thought. Kei was one of Eri's closest friends, the second child Izuku adopted, and her first sister. Maybe she had the answers that Eri didn't. The library. Kei was currently reading a book called Animorphs when Eri walked in. Kei? Eri called out to her sister. Eri. Kei immediately put down her book and rapidly patted the seat next to her. Come here. Come here. Eri did as instructed, walking over and climbing up on the seat next to the snake girl. Kei promptly wrapped Eri in a tight hug. I missed you. Why you saw me this morning? Eri quietly pointed out. That's too loaning. Kei complained. Kei proceeded to cuddle Eri, and Eri found herself petting the snakes in her hair to calm herself. Eventually, Kei noticed that Eri was upset, however, and momentarily stopped the cuddling. What's wrong? Eri bit her lip and explained. Another explanation later. I would do it. Kei said after hearing her out. You would? Eri asked. If people need help, then you should help them, Kei stated simply. That's what Izuku thinks. And if he didn't think that, we would all still be sad and in danger. That statement crashed into Eri's mind, as she realized just how true that statement was. Izuku had to make hard decisions a lot too. Izuku was probably super scared when she knocked on his door and asked him to help her hide from a criminal. But he did it, and with practically no hesitation. He was probably scared when that villain was robbing the supermarket using Kei, but he didn't run or hide, he saved her. Izuku always tried to help people, even if he was scared, even if something bad might happen to him. And because of that, she was here. Because of that, they were all here. Because of that, they were a family. Eri felt like she wanted to do the same thing, that she should do the same thing. But you don't have to if you don't wanna, Kay said, tightening the hug once more. I don't wanna ever make you sad. Don't do something that will make you sad. Well, that was a conflicting statement. Did she want Eri to do it or not? Right now she was thinking that she should do it, but what Kyoko said earlier, about them maybe using them as weapons, and her own fear of having her blood taken were still making her indecisive. Maybe she should ask someone smart about this? Other than Izuku, he was busy, and she didn't want to bother him any more than she did, so who was the other smartest person here? Kitchen. Fu and Yami were busy munching down on meats when Eri came up to their table. Fu? Fu? Eri asked. Fu paused for a moment, before finishing up the slab of meat as fast as he could. Once he was done, he turned to Eri. Whacked? Huck. Ate. Fu shoved his hand down his throat in a way that looked extremely uncomfortable, and after a few moments, he grabbed the piece of meat that had gotten stuck in his throat, before putting it back in his mouth, chewing and swallowing it properly. Do you need something, Eri? Fu asked. Something's wrong, Yami said after eating his own slab of meat. Lots of bad feelings. Did those men do something? Lots of bad feelings everywhere after they left. Eri paused for a moment. She wasn't going to get Yami involved at first, but since he knew something was wrong, she might as well tell him to, if only to keep him from worrying. Yet another explanation later. Fu said. That's hard. Yami nodded in agreement. Yeah, hard. What should I do? Eri asked. Well, I don't think I can tell you what to do. Fu said. I give blood all the time, but I don't feel pain or fear. So it's all different for me. It's probably different for everyone. Eri immediately looked disappointed. You're the one making the choice, Fu said. So which do you feel worse about? Not helping those people or getting your blood drained? Eri thought about it. She hated both options. But which one did she hate the least? It was so hard. Both options caused her immense amounts of fear, stress, anger, and just every negative emotion known to man. She couldn't tell which one she hated more. Luckily, someone could. Think about first option, Yami told her. Huh? Eri asked. Think about first option, Yami repeated. You mean not helping them? Fu asked, receiving a nod from Yami. Eri didn't know where this was going, but she followed the instruction anyway, mostly because she was slightly scared of annoying Yami. She thought about all these people, stuck in a room, all alone, never going outside, never getting to do all the good things in the world, like go to an amusement park. And they would be like this, forever. Many emotions flowed through her. Guilt and self-hatred at the thought of her own selfishness being in the way of these people's happiness, as well as fear and sadness at the thought that they would be stuck there forever. After a few seconds, Yami spoke again. Now think about the other one. You mean giving them her blood? Fu asked to clarify, receiving another nod. Eri thought about it. She thought of being in that chair again. Izuku reassured her it wouldn't be like with Overhaul, but all she could think of was that chair, and the brief memory of Overhaul coming towards her, before the memories ended because Kyoko erased them. She couldn't remember being taken apart. But she could remember the fear of it, the fear she had felt every day until Izuku saved her. The fear she felt now wasn't new, it was an old fear, one that was put aside but never away. An old fear that now exploded out and made her want to cower and hide. Second option. Give blood. Yami said. Huh? Eri was taken off guard by this sudden answer. The first one feels worse, Yami said. The second one isn't as bad. As Eri was looking at him in confusion, Fu figured out what Yami meant. Yami can see emotions, Fu explained. So he told you to think of both options to see which one made you feel worse. And apparently giving blood doesn't make you feel as bad. It doesn't? Eri asked, a little wide-eyed. First one feels worse, second one not as bad. Do the second one, give blood. Yami said. That actually made Eri feel a little better. It made her choice, which had been tearing at her all day, a little easier. The only thing keeping her from helping those people were her own feelings. But, if she was just going to feel worse if she didn't help them anyway, then the choice was obvious. However, making the choice easier didn't make it easy. Her fear was still gnawing at her, and grabbing her as if it was trying to keep her in place. She wanted to go make the decision, she wanted to help. She knows she should help. And she knew that not helping wouldn't be good for her either. But even after all this time, fear was still trying to hold her back. You're a good person, Eri, Fu said, gaining everyone's attention. You want to help people so much that not helping people makes you feel worse than something you're afraid of. That means you're brave and selfless, just like Izuku. Like Izuku? Eri asked, small tears welling in her eyes. Fu nodded. You want to be a doctor, right? So those people are your first patients. I think you may be the youngest doctor ever. Eri stayed quiet, silently being reassured by Fu's words, which was exactly the boy's intention. Izuku told me and Kiba that to be heroes and to save people, we have to overcome our fears. And you're doing that right now. So you're like a hero doctor. Fu knew that Eri must be going through a lot with this choice, so he had to say everything he could to help her. A hero, doctor, Eri whispered. Yami looked at Eri as the immense feeling of negativity was somewhat mitigated by Fu's reassurance. It was still an overwhelming amount of negativity, but Fu seemed to be helping a tiny bit. Yeah, a hero doctor. You're really good. Yami said in an attempt to help. Eri seemed stuck there, unable to move as all sorts of emotions overwhelmed her. Fu hopped down from the chair and took Eri's hand. Why don't we tell Izuku about your decision? Eri gave a hesitant nod, and Fu took her by the hand and guided her to Izuku's office. Izuku's office? Yes, and under no circumstances do I want them to weaponize this, Izuku said to his newly hired lawyers. And dash. Knock. Hold on a second please, Izuku said. Come in. Fu walked in with Eri in tow. Izuku? Eri has her answer. Really? Izuku hadn't expected it to come this fast. Although why is Fu with her? Did he see how panicked she was and try to help? Well, it's Fu, so I doubt he would try to pressure her into anything. That's more Kyoko's thing. Izuku sighed, remembering how long it took for him to convince Kyoko that he wasn't letting them do anything bad to Eri. Because you better believe he had plans to stop and scheming the government may be doing. Not that it would matter if Eri said no. Fu brought Eri over to Izuku's desk and then stood behind her. Go on, you can do it. Eri looked at Izuku, fear and hesitation still very clear on her face, and if Izuku looked close enough he could see that she was slightly trembling. Will they use my blood to hurt people? Eri asked. Before she could say yes, she had to know the answer to this. Izuku rubbed her head reassuringly. I would never let them do that. Ever. The definitiveness in Izuku's voice helped Eri make her choice. Then I want to help. Eri managed to say, her trembling increasing, and she shut her eyes as tears started coming down her cheeks. Please let me help. Not even a second later, Izuku was embracing her. My brave little girl. I'm so proud of you. Eri took in the praise, letting it comfort her as the finality of her choice set in, and images of the chair pledged her mind. It's okay. Everything's going to be okay. Izuku reassured her. Fu joined in muttering comforting words, and the trio stayed like this for a long time, until Eri eventually ran out of energy. I'm tired. Eri sniffled. That's okay, Eri, you just go rest, Izuku told her. Fu, bring her to her room. And make sure she's not alone. Fu nodded, lifting up Eri and walking out of his office. Once they left, Izuku sat back in his chair and leaned back, releasing a breath he had been holding. It had been an emotional moment for him too, and many of those emotions lingered inside of him. Fear, worry, sadness, self-hate, and pride. Pride in his daughter's selflessness. Izuku saw his phone and immediately remembered what he had been doing beforehand and picked it up as fast as he could. I'm so sorry that took so long. Izuku apologized. Let's get back to discussing the contract. 2 days later. The men from DOZ once again walked into his office, with the lead man taking a seat in front of Izuku. You said you had an answer? The man asked. Yes, we will be handing over the blood, Izuku said, much to the men's elation. However, I have many stipulations. Izuku pulled out a thick contract from a drawer in his desk and laid on the table in front of them. These are my terms, there will be no exceptions. Read them, and either you agree to them, or you don't get the blood. Izuku said firmly, making the men nervous. The lead agent spent half an hour reading the contract and learned just how right he was to be nervous. In short, the terms were as such. Under no circumstance could the formula be used outside the purpose of getting rid of the quirks of level 2 OPCs. And they could not be weaponized at all. The requirements of using the formula is as such. They must have the approval of all legal guardians, and the person themselves. The person must be at least 10 years old and be made fully aware of the consequences and after effects of this decision. Then they must submit a form to Izuku or a person of Izuku's choosing, that he or a person of his choosing must approve. Any and all things involving Eri's blood Izuku should be made aware of, and he had the right to check on any and all things involving her blood. DLC would not be directly involved with the extraction of or handling of blood, and that duty would instead fall to another branch of the government. Basically, this would give Izuku full control over everything that happened involving this project. We can't accept this. The man said. Well, then you're not getting her blood. Izuku knew exactly what position he was in. Eri's blood was an irreplaceable ingredient for the quirk erasing formula. And he had a full monopoly over it. Those kids that DOC holding would cost them absurd amounts of money to contain for the rest of their lives, and so if they could just get rid of their quirks, then they'd stand to save a crap ton of money. But to do that, they needed Eri. Izuku had all the power here. So he could afford to make unreasonable demands, so long as the government stood to gain all that money from it, they'd be stupid to refuse. That, and also, I wonder how the public would feel about you refusing my terms though, Izuku said out loud, causing the men to panic. Because honestly, the reason you wouldn't be able to agree with them is if you had some kind of ulterior motive. And I wonder how the people would react to that ulterior motive getting in the way of helping people in need. Izuku had not signed any non-disclosure agreements, meaning at any point in time he could talk about everything that was going on here, and if something happened that he didn't like, it wouldn't be too hard to bring the hammer of bad public opinion down on the government for this. The man grit his teeth and looked over the contract again, before looking back at Izuku. Let us talk to our superiors. Izuku nodded, and the men walked out of the room and pulled out their phones. He waited, and waited, and waited for a while more, and after a lengthy amount of time, they came back in. Maybe we can negotiate these terms. The lead agent said. Perhaps some compensation can be given dash. I don't want any money. Izuku interrupted him. I will say this one last time, if I have to say it again, then we're finished here. These are my terms. Either sign the contract or leave. The man paused, before saying. I need to talk with my superiors again. Tell your superiors that I don't have all day, Izuku said impatiently. The three men left the room once more, and Izuku took that moment to lean back in his chair and relax for a moment. It was exhausting to act so aggressive and rude. It just wasn't in his nature. But he needed to act like this. He had to remember that he had the power here, and use that power to pressure them. Otherwise, there would be dire consequences. He looked at a picture of himself and Eri making apple pie. He had to remember why he did this, who he was doing this for. Even if it doubled his workload, it would be worth it. When he heard the door open, he immediately straightened up, and the men walked back in, with resigned looks on their faces. "We'll need some time to spread this around and get all the proper signatures, but we plan on agreeing to your terms," the main agent said. Izuku smiled but did his best to hide his relief and excitement. "That's great. I'll let you take this copy of the contract so you can make copies and you can contact me when everything is signed." "Of course." The man all but sighed. As the men took the contract and left, Izuku silently celebrated his success in his office. "I need some tea," he thought. A week later. Eri sat anxiously in her bed. Today was the date of the blood donation. Izuku decided it should be as soon as possible so Eri didn't have to suffer the suspense forever. There were some doctors there with some machines, and a mask connected to a tube that they would use to put her to sleep. Izuku was also present, kneeling down next to Eri and holding her hand to comfort her. "It's okay, everything's going to be okay. I'm so proud of you, you're so brave. You're going to help so many people. Alright, now we just need her to lay down and we can start," said one of the doctors. Izuku gave her the most reassuring smile he could muster. "Just lie down, Eri. When you wake up, it will all be over." "Okay," Eri muttered quietly. She laid down, and the doctors descended upon her. As fear grew inside her, she comforted herself by squeezing Izuku's hands tighter. As the mask came down on her face, she quickly went to sleep. The last words she heard were, "One day, you'll do this without any fear at all." And then everything went black. When Eri opened her eyes, she was back in the chair. The same chair Overhaul had put her in so many times before. In the exact same Yakuza base, she hoped to never see again. Panic and fear flooded her body, as her brain immediately told her to run. But she couldn't move. No matter how much she tried, her body wouldn't budge. Then, she heard footsteps. Footsteps coming from outside the room, walking towards her. Fear grew in her as the footsteps grew closer, and tears started to drip from her eyes each second her body refused to move. Then, the door opened. But who walked in wasn't Overhaul, it was her. It was Eri. Just as she had been before Izuku found her. In that plain dress, with her old bandages. The doppelganger walked closer to her, staring at her intently. "Why are we here again?" asked the doppelganger. Eri didn't answer, she was too confused, too scared. "Why did you let them hurt us again?" the doppelganger asked. Eri felt like she wanted to answer. She wanted to say that they weren't going to hurt her. That she would be fine. But the words died in her throat. However, the doppelganger seemed to read Eri's mind. And knew what she wanted to say. "They're taking your blood, Eri. They're doing what Overhaul did. They're gonna take you apart again. And no." Eri spoke for the first time. "No, they won't." Eri suddenly blinked, and the doppelganger transformed. She now had on Overhaul's mask and jacket. "Why do you think you can help people?" As the doppelganger spoke, Eri could hear Overhaul's voice speak with her, as if she and Overhaul were speaking at the same time. "You know your quirk is a curse." "No, it's not." Eri denied. Izuku said dash. "Izuku's not here, you weak pathetic girl." The doppelganger started to turn more monstrous, the bandages flew off revealing scars and cuts underneath, all bleeding out on the floor, and bird-like feathers started to grow on her until she was nothing but a freak abomination of herself and Overhaul combined. "But I'm here. I'm always here. You can't escape me, Eri. You're mine. Always mine. Forever." Eri screamed as the nightmare opened its huge bird beak and swallowed her whole. Now, Eri was floating in darkness. Alone, and scared. She couldn't see a thing. "Izuku! Izuku!" Eri called out into the darkness. Why can't you do anything on your own? Suddenly the bird monster appeared in front of her, its beacon eyes popping out of the darkness, still using her and Overhaul's voice. You worthless girl. Why can't you help yourself? Eri started sobbing, as the nightmare kept berating her. Please. Help. She cried. And then, there was a light. A light pierced through the darkness, and a figure reached out of the light and grabbed onto Eri. Shush, shush, it's okay. It can't hurt you anymore. The light died down a bit, and the figure was revealed to be what looked like an older-looking Eri. She was wearing stereotypical doctor attire, but the oddest part was that her hair and eyes were green, and she was still faintly glowing. You don't have to be afraid of them. She said, her voice, much like the nightmares, was a combination of her own voice and someone else's, in this case, that being Izuku's. The dream Eri took Eri into her embrace, and Eri clung to this strange vision of her future self. She could feel her hand, it was warm, like Izuku's. You can't be saved, Eri. You're mine. The nightmare repeated words Overhaul had more or less said to her over and over, its darkness surrounding the two of them, enriching upon them. The dream Eri glared at the nightmare, and as the darkness threatened to engulf them, the dream Eri's glow brightened and destroyed the darkness. Ah! The nightmare screamed in pain. You're a liar. You've always been a liar. The dream Eri said. Your lies and mean words can't hurt anyone anymore. Eri's too strong. She's a strong, brave girl now. The dream Eri looked down at regular Eri. Eri, it's time to get rid of them now. Suddenly, the dream Eri's light started to spread onto Eri, until she was now glowing with light. No! No! The nightmare sent out more darkness to attack the two of them. The dream gave Eri a gentle smile that reminded her of Izuku. Hold out your hand, Eri. They're waiting for you. Eri looked at the darkness, and then at the dream, before hesitantly, she and the dream held out their hands to stop the darkness. And then, all she saw was light. Back in the real world. Eri opened her eyes and was met with several blurry figures as her eyes tried to adjust to the light. I think she's waking up. Shouted a loud female voice. Don't be too loud. Scolded another feminine voice. Is she okay? Said a male voice that was further away. When Eri's eyes refocused, she saw that she was surrounded by her siblings and Izuku. Almost everyone was here, most of her siblings, and Izuku were right up next to her bed. Otoko kept a good distance, being in the back of the room, and Kai was outside the window. The only one who wasn't here was Fukunoko, which made sense considering she couldn't bear to be around one other person, let alone 11. Eri was about to ask what everyone was doing here when she felt a small pain in her arm. She quickly looked at her arm and saw that there was a bandage on her arm. It's over, Eri, Izuku told her. It's done. They took the blood. Eri's eyes widened in disbelief. That was it? That was all? She went to sleep and woke up and the worst thing she had to endure was a slight soreness? Izuku had told her as much, so she shouldn't be surprised, but this was nothing. She felt more pain than this when she stubbed her toe. Overhaul's blood-taking was 1,000 times worse. If it was this easy, then did he just hurt her because he hated her that much? Given what she knew of Overhaul, she figured the answer to that was yes. At last you have awoken. We were quite worried about you. Caretaker said that he didn't want you alone when you woke up. So we all arrived here to greet you. Kiba said. Are you okay, Eri? Kei asked, engulfing her in a hug. Hey, I want to hug her too. Kyoka said, going up and hugging Eri as well. Don't think you can get ahead of me. Kiba said, crawling over her siblings to hug Eri. Hey! Don't overwhelm her. Izuku said, but with no effect. As Eri was being swarmed by her siblings, she felt as if any other time she would have been overwhelmed. But now. After the donation, she was just glad she didn't wake up alone again. Happy tears streamed down her cheeks as she realized that things were well and truly different. Meanwhile, Yami watched Eri closely, as for once the positive emotions overwhelmed the negative ones. He knew he did his job well. Later that night. Given that Eri had slept for a good portion of the day, Izuku let her stay up later than normal. She had been spending that time watching TV when suddenly she got a knock on the door. Eri paused what she was watching and walked to the door. When she opened it, to her surprise, there was an entire tray of fresh chocolate chip cookies just sitting there, with a note next to it. She looked around for anyone who could have left it, and saw that Fukunoko was looking at her from behind one of the corners, only to flee when she realized she'd been spotted. She left her room? Eri thought in surprise. Once she got over the fact that the famed recluse left her room for once, she looked down at the cookies and the note. In the note, written in very neat handwriting, was as such. I'm sorry I didn't come with everyone. I promise I care about you. I was just scared. Take the cookies. Please keep being my friend. Eri looked at the note and then at the cookies. Slowly, she took one of the cookies and bit into it. It's good, Eri thought. Eri looked at the rest of the cookies. Part of her wanted to finish the rest of them off, but she had a better idea. At Fukunoko's room. Fuku was sitting in her room, hoping beyond hope that Eri accepted the cookies and would still be friends with her. Oh my god, what if she hates the cookies? Stupid Fuku, you should have thought of something better. Fuku berated herself. Knock knock. EAP. Fuku jumped. Fuku? Can I come in? Eri asked. Please? Are you mad? Fuku asked. No. I'm happy, Eri said. Why you are? Fuku asked. Yes, Eri said. Fuku hesitated for a bit, before ultimately deciding to open the door. On the other side, was Eri, with the plate of cookies. I wanted to share, Eri said. As share? Fuku repeated in shock. Eri nodded. The cookies are good, but food is better when you eat with someone else. Me? Fuku said, as there was anyone else here. You want to eat with me? Eri nodded again. You're my friend. And just like that, the two of them spent the rest of the night, staying up way past their bedtimes, eating sugar and watching TV together. Neither of them could have asked for more. Chapter 30, Shorts 8. Not with a 10-foot pole. Kaizoma Kaguro, aka Stain the Hero Killer, had a problem. And that problem's name was Kiba Midoriya. The kid was an up-and-coming internet star, gaining a surprising amount of followers for her age, mostly due to her personality, cute factor, and power. Normally Stain wouldn't have cared in the slightest. However, the problem was that she wanted to be a hero. And she wanted to be a hero to expand her followers to one day take over the world. So naturally, Stain, who wanted heroes to only have pure motives, had an issue with this. Now some would say that she's just a silly child and that she would grow up and see how ridiculous this was. Stain would argue otherwise. People with powerful quirks, which Kiba most certainly had, tended to be arrogant, whether they be a hero or a villain. And the girl was clearly a rich spoiled girl, meaning she was definitely gonna keep that arrogance as she grew up. All in all, the girl would most likely grow up to be another fame-obsessed, superficial, fake hero. Which is why Stain wanted to beat the shit out of her. Not kill her, she was very young. Meaning she could perhaps be educated instead of slaughtered. Stain wanted to sneak into that overly large house of hers and stab her a few times, break a few bones, leave some permanent scarring, and then leave. Normally this wouldn't be a problem. It should be easy to beat up a child. But Kiba Midoriya was no average child. Calling this child strong would be like saying the sun was a bit bright. She was ridiculously strong, able to fight giant kaiju at full power, could run a mile faster than he could run 10 feet, and could survive falling from skyscraper-level heights. In other words, in terms of fighting, she was out of his league. Sure, he was way more experienced and skilled, but that didn't matter much when power difference was so apparent that he wouldn't even be to physically harm her, and one hit would be enough to crush his skull in. But that wasn't the real problem. If it was just Kiba by herself, he could beat her. Not at full power, but she wasn't always at full power. Her power relied on how much blood she'd consumed. Meaning that there must be a time she would be weak enough for him to beat her. But it didn't matter much, because it wasn't just Kiba. Her whole family was a problem. Firstly, if he wanted to beat Kiba, then he'd need to do it when she was low on blood. However, she seemed to almost constantly be followed by her brother Fu, an infinite supply of blood. Secondly, there were the two other siblings she'd shown off, Shiroku and Kai, both of whom he wasn't exactly sure he could beat at all. With both of them being similar in power to Kiba, but seemingly not sharing her weakness. And thirdly, was the sister Sansen Midoriya, who he definitely could not beat. She seemed to either be made of goo or acid, didn't matter, either way, he couldn't hurt her and she could hurt him. Now, Stain had wondered why the hell there were so many kids with grossly overpowered quirks in one place. And after a bit of digging, he figured out why. Because they were part of a program that collected overpowered children and kept them in one place. Meaning not only would he have to deal with the children he already knew about, but also all the children he didn't know about, would also be grossly overpowered and dangerous. Oh, and he'd also have to deal with whatever security there would be for the house as well. Even if he had a death wish that big, he wouldn't choose to die at the hands of 7-year-olds. The only person who I will allow to defeat me is All Might himself. Stain thought. So no, as much as it pained him to see someone like Kiba Midoriya continue to arrogantly state she wanted to be a hero for such self-centered reasons, he wouldn't do anything about it. Because he couldn't. He could, in theory, just stalk her until she was weak enough and far away from everyone else for him to attack her. However, it seems she rarely ever left her house, and never left without one of her siblings, it seems. Of course, there would have to be exceptions. At some point she would leave the house alone, but the amount of time Stain would have to dedicate to find that specific moment just wouldn't be worth it. He could spend that time killing actual pro heroes. For now, the girl was safe from his wrath. For now. Security. Izuku was doing more paperwork in his office when Yami came in on a Beowulf. Oh, hi Yami. Is something wrong? Izuku asked him. Lots of energy, Yami told him. It took a second for Izuku to figure out what he meant. You mean you have lots of negative energy to make grim? Yami nodded. Want to be useful? Oh. Izuku smiled at him. Thank you Yami, but it's your quirk, are you sure? Don't you want to use it for yourself? No, Yami said bluntly. No need. Ha. Well, I guess he barely does anything except sleep and eats. Izuku thought. But still, what could I use the Grim for? Well, what is the limit of what Yami can create? Maybe I can help him explore that. He would probably use the Grim as security. The griffin that had washed Kai were used to patrol the skies around the house. Make sure that nothing could come out of the air and pluck someone away, again. We should see what kind of Grim you can create, Izuku told him. Let me finish up some more work, and then we can go to the library and then the training room. Yami nodded and laid down on his Beowulf to wait. Half an hour later, in the training room. The two of them arrived in the indestructible room, with the Beowulf carrying a load of books. Kei had also joined them at Izuku's insistence, having met up with them in the library. Why books? Yami asked, wondering why Izuku had wanted them to bring a crapload of books with them. Well, I want to see what kind of creatures you can create, Izuku explained. You created a lot of Grim just based on animals you saw, but you also created a griffin. I guess Kiba suggested that, so that means you're not limited to things that exist in the real world. Griffins aren't real? Yami asked, somewhat shocked. They aren't? Kei asked, looking a bit dejected at that. No, sorry, Izuku said, much to Kei's disappointment. But that means that with enough energy, Yami could create pretty much anything. Yami looked, only slightly amazed by that idea, which still caused him to show more expression on his face than he did normally. Oh. Oh. Can you create a snake? A big snake. With 2 heads? Kei asked, as her imagination started to go wild. As Izuku intended. Okay, maybe we can talk about what it will look like and dash. Before Izuku could finish, Yami had already started creating the grim, barfing up the black goop on the floor. Oh. From the black goo rose a black snakehead, twice the size of Izuku's own head, showing that once again this grim was big. The snake grim slithered out of the pool, showing that it was in fact huge, and when it finally finished emerging, instead of a tail on the end, it was a white snakehead. The snake was big, roughly around 8 feet in length, and 2.5 feet in width. Half of its body was black with a few white patterns, and the other half was white with some black patterns. Ah! It's perfect! Kei practically had stars in her eyes, and she ran up to the snake and hugged it with her might, her snakes hissing happily and rubbing against the grim. Interesting, these patterns are too elaborate for Yami to come up with. Come to think of it, most of the grim are too elaborately designed. I wonder why they look like this. Izuku pondered, before realizing something important. Wait. What am I gonna do with this thing? It's not like the snake was too big for the house. But a giant snake roaming the house wouldn't exactly make the shy kids or the new kids feel at home. Maybe I could use it in events? Make sure that no one can sneak in through them? I guess that could work. Izuku watched Kei snuggle up to the snake, a huge smile plastered on her face. Maybe let Kei have one too. See if we can make it smaller. Suddenly the door opened, and a very pouty Kiba ran in with a book in her arms. I heard you were creating new grim. And you didn't invite me. Kiba sounded more than a little offended. Oh, sorry Kiba, I thought you were busy streaming? Izuku asked her. I was, but I could have stopped. Kiba crossed her arms and pouted, holding the book to her chest. Kiba's displeasure dissipated almost immediately when she saw the snake and was replaced with excitement. Ah! Of course, Kei would suggest a snake. And what a wonderful snake it is! A truly impressive monster. What shall we name this creation? That's right, it needs a name. Kei agreed. The children racked their heads trying to come up with a name. Izuku was the first one to speak. How about Taijitu? Taijitu? Kiba repeated. Why yeah. You know, like the symbol. The circle that has black and white on it. Let me show you. Izuku pulled up a picture of it on his phone. This symbol. Oh, I've seen that. Kiba pointed at it excitedly. Still, it needs something more. King Taijitu. That's perfect. Hello, King Taijitu. Kei shouted as she hugged the big snake. Sure. Sounds cool. Yami was, as usual, neutral to the names given to his grim, but he wasn't against it and it made them happy, so he rolled with it. Alright, let's make another one. Kiba opened the book she was holding, showing them a picture of a manticore. This is a manticore. It has the body of a lion, a scorpion tail, and bird wings, and it breathes fire. This may have been a mistake. Izuku thought. I'm okay. What do you mean 5? Izuku almost shouted into the phone. Well, here is the thing. You want all these kids out of the facility, we want all these kids out of the facility. So we're just gonna increase the number of kids we give you until you otherwise. Nami told him. Of course you could just ask us to lower the amount. Of course, that will mean some of the kids will have to stay here longer, but if it helps you get a little more rest time, I guess it's worth it. Not worth it to those kids, but worth it to you. Stop. Izuku snapped. Izuku was so tired of her blatantly trying to manipulate him, and so tired of it working. That, combined with how tired he was feeling in general, he just snapped. Immediately after his small anger spike, he was filled with remorse. Maybe we should stay at 3 for now, Nami said, taken off guard by Izuku's uncharacteristic outburst. Aye, yeah. He didn't want to leave those kids in the facilities longer than he had to, but after that outburst, he figured he should slow down, otherwise, he might snap at the children, which is the last thing he wanted to do. Great. We should have them to you in 2 days. I'll send the information about the kids via email. Nami said. And maybe hire some people. You sound stressed. I know, Izuku muttered, taking a long sip of his tea. I am sorry for my outburst. Please forgive me. It's fine, man. Just maybe see a therapist. Lord knows you need one. Nami said. Anyway, Nami out. She hung up, leaving Izuku alone in his office to prepare. He decided to spend the next few minutes between now and when the info on the new kids would be sent, relaxing in his chair with his tea. The warmth of the calming tea soothed him slightly as he leaned back and closed his eyes. However, panic suddenly overwhelmed him as he very nearly fell asleep. Can't sleep yet, still have work to do. Izuku reminded himself. Izuku moved his calming tea away from him and instead took a cup of coffee he kept on hand. As he was drinking his cup of wake-up juice, there was a knock on his door. Can I come in? It was Yami. Ah, yes, of course, Izuku told him after gulping down his drink. Yami walked in, and if one looked closely, they could see that his expression was a bit more concerned than usual. Something bad happened? Yami asked. And no. Izuku denied. Nothing's wrong, why would you ask? Bad feelings exploded. Yami tried to explain as best he could. As usual, it took Izuku a second to figure what Yami was saying. His inexperience speaking combined with his unique way of seeing the world made it hard to figure out what he was saying at times. Eventually, Izuku figured it out. He must have sensed when I snapped at Nami. I got upset for a moment. But it's fine. Izuku lied. Yami scowled at him. Liar. Ha? Izuku was taken aback. Yami had always been so passive and cooperative since he got here. This was the first time he's shown any hint of disapproval towards Izuku. You're getting worse, Yami told him. More bad feelings, every day. Not anger, lot of fear, lot of sadness, lots of other things. You are not okay. Izuku was really caught off guard. Although in hindsight it should have been obvious. Yami could literally see emotions, so of course, he would notice if he'd been stressed out, although he didn't seem to be able to identify stress, just seeing it as another bad emotion, most likely due to lack of experience. Still, he would have to explain this away somehow. Preferably in a way that didn't make him worry. Listen, I just have a lot to do, so I've been stressed out recently. Izuku tried to explain. Stress? Yami repeated, wondering if that was that bad feeling he didn't recognize. Yes, stress, Izuku told him. Don't worry, I'm going to hire some new helpers soon and dash. Lair. Yami interrupted. I see you lying. Izuku's eyes widened. Wait, you can see lies? Yami nodded. You feel worse when you lie. Oh, that's actually really clever. But it means I can't lie to him. Izuku didn't particularly like lying to the children. But he would do so if he thought it was in their best interest, although he never felt good about it. WLUC. Izuku desperately searched for a way to keep him in the dark without lying to him. Meanwhile, Yami was getting frustrated. He had come here to see what was bothering his father and hopefully make him feel better, but that feeling, stress, was only increasing since he got here. What's wrong? Yami repeated aggressively. I. Izuku sighed. It doesn't matter how I'm doing. Or what's wrong. I'm just really stressed about my work. I'm trying to fix the problem, but it's taking a while and I'm having some issues. But it's nothing for you to be worried about. Yami growled. But dash. Yami! Izuku shouted, causing the boy to flinch. Having never heard Izuku shout before. Just, let it go, please. Yami looked up at his father. He really wanted to make those bad feelings go away. But he only seemed to be making things worse. For now, he would back down. But he'd try something else. Yami bowed his head. I'm sorry, Dad. No, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have yelled at you like that. Izuku apologized. You were only trying to help. How about I make steak tonight? That should have excited him, and it did make him feel a bit better, but he was still very upset over his failure to help Izuku and left without saying another word. Once he left, Izuku's head fell into his hands, as shame and guilt ate away at him. I can't keep going like this. I've started yelling at the kids. I need to hire help. Suddenly, Izuku's phone vibrated. He took it out and saw a notification that he had gotten the files on the new kids. I'll look at workers after this, Izuku told himself. Hours later. It was late at night. And many of the kids had fallen asleep. However, as usual, the nightlife of this house was almost as active as the day. Kids like Sansan and Fu never needed to sleep, so they often stayed up all night. Kiba liked to go outside during the night, as the sun would not be around to bother her. Fukinoko would like to sneak out of her room, to do things around the house that she couldn't do in the day because of the number of people. Izuku was also often awake during the night, doing work. Tonight, however, someone else was awake. That being Yami. Fu was in the library, reading a book, when Yami, riding on his Beowulf as usual, came up to him. Yami? Is something wrong? Fu asked him. You smart, Yami said. You mean, you're smart. Fu corrected. No, you smart, Yami told him. No, I mean you said it wrong, Fu said. It's you're not you. Oh. Yami realized his mistake. You're smart. There you go. And yes, I am. Fu said. He was very aware of his own intelligence, compared to everyone else, thanks to the emotional distance his quirk gave him, one of few benefits it afforded him. Problem. Dad has lots of bad emotions. Yami tried to explain. Tried to help. Made it worse. Fu nodded. How bad is it? Bad, Yami said. No, I mean, is it worse than Fukinoko? Fu asked. Almost, Yami said. Fu frowned. I knew Izuku wasn't feeling good, but if it's that bad. The undead miner thought about the situation. Confronting him, according to Yami, only made the situation worse. Fu was smart enough to realize when he needed help. We should ask Achiko for help next time she's here, Fu said. Right now we should just try not to make things harder for him. For whatever reason, the two boys had a bad feeling about this. Like whatever they had just stumbled on was the tip of the iceberg. They would just have to wait and see how this all played out. That will be it for this part. I hope everyone enjoyed. If you did, please leave a like and comment if you want part 7. If you want to hear more from me, subscribe. I hope to see you all in the next one.